From sheriff to congressman, we're talking with Mark Lamb about his campaign for the 2026 election. Plus, what can we expect from the weather in November and December? A meteorologist gives the predictions for this upcoming season. And tensions are escalating between the United States and Venezuela, and experts shares where the conflict could be headed. It's all that and more this evening on Broomhead. Welcome, I'm Mike Broomhead. Before we jump into today's interviews, let's take a look at some of the top stories. The Fed cutting interest rates again, 25 basis points for the second time this year to the lowest rate in 3 years. So that's good news. They are believing the economy is strong enough. The inflation numbers we saw, even though inflation was at 3%, they thought maybe it would jump higher than that. It was good news. Wall Street responded to that very positively, which I think is why the Fed felt confident in lowering interest rates again another 25 basis points. But what we have to keep our eyes on now is what's going on in the economy. With what happened in the shutdown, how is that going to affect holiday spending? And what is it doing to the overall economy in other places? Amazon announcing it's laying off 14,000 workers. And you've also got UPS also with layoffs. Now, their stocks responded positively because it's going to do well for their bottom lines. But will there be deeper layoffs? These are all management, mid-level management layoffs to their corporate headquarters, kind of cutting the fat in management. But what are we going to see with the U.S. economy in the coming days? What is Thanksgiving spending going to be like? Another thing to consider with that is the new version or variant of the avian flu that our government's saying is not really, we're not prepared for, that can be transformed to humans. But the other part of that is turkey may be even more expensive than it was last year. So with that being said, going into the Christmas season and holiday spending, all eyes are going to be on the U.S. economy. What affected the shutdown and the lack of productivity? Remember the statistic in Arizona, $1.3 billion per month in economic loss when you have a shutdown. So how will that affect the overall economy in Arizona? What does it do to our spending ability? And what happens if we see turkey prices and others go up? These are all questions in the economy, and I think that are great questions. And the big concern for me is going to be the jobs and wage increases. That's always the key indicator for me to look for. Coming up, former Sheriff Mark Lamb is putting his name in the race for CD5. Find out why he's making the switch from sheriff to congressman. That's next on Broomhead. It's important to recognize and thank the fine Arizona men and women who are serving in our country's military. One of the ways we like to do that is through a segment called From Arizona for America, brought to you by my good friends at Sanderson Ford. So join me in honoring Navy Chief Petty Officer Scott Musoff, a native of Tucson, Arizona. He is training in Fort Drum, New York. For a list of more of our friends and neighbors that are from Arizona for America, just go to the Broomhead tab at cw7az.com. It's always political season, but a big name in a race, CD5, former Pinal County Sheriff Mark Lamb. Not surprised, I got to say, not surprised, but glad to hear you're doing this.
Thank you. I was a little surprised.
Were you?
You know, politics is tough. And, you know, I've been in law enforcement for a long time, politics, so it wasn't something I was looking at jumping back into. But in the end, I can't tell these stories of the founding fathers, of their sacrifice and their courage, and not be willing to do it myself, you know, say, oh, it's not right time for me. In the end, I just couldn't walk away from the fight. And I think what Arizona needs, and Andy has done, Andy Biggs has been my congressman in CD5 for a long time. These are big shoes to fill because he's got a great conservative record. And what we need is to continue that tradition of people that are unapologetic and unafraid to stand up for American values, for God, family, freedom, and the greatness of America. And that's what in the end, that's what brought me back. And I'm full force. I'm ready to go. And I think we're going to do really well. And I look forward to serving the people.
Let's talk about a couple of the priorities. Everybody keeps talking about fiscal responsibility. The DOGE came in. There were some cuts that were made. But we're still $37 trillion in debt and climbing. How do you get with people that are like-minded, that are willing to make the hard decisions to get the fiscal house in order?
Well, I think we're starting to expose some of the issues with our fiscal problems, you know, our debt. I think that we exposed a lot of money going outside of America, tax dollars earned here, hardworking tax dollars going to other countries for silly things oftentimes, funding other wars that are not our wars. And then we also have now this newest information is 42 million people that are actually on EBT or some sort of government assistance. And we've got as high as 59% of them may be non-US born and many of them illegal. Those are issues that we have to address if we're going to get our debt and our economy under control. We also, at the same time, need to make sure that we're rallying with enough people to get the right jobs in places. You know, what houses cost is the average median income here in Arizona is about $446,000. And the average income is anywhere between $65,000 and $80,000. I saw different statistics.
Yeah.
How do you afford houses? How do kids afford houses? So I would love to see more manufacturing jobs brought here to Arizona, better paying jobs. I think that we focus on jobs and make sure we continue to trim the fat on a federal level. I think we can start to get this under control.
The fact that you've held an office, even though the sheriff's office isn't a political office, it is an elected office. So you've served in an elected capacity. You've run for office in the past. It's got to give you some experience now to run a campaign. But the difference is, now that you're in this East Valley, you've watched the explosion of growth in the East Valley. How do you manage that? In Washington, D.C., we know it's managed growth. But how do you manage an office in D.C. to help your district at home? Am I asking the right question?
Yeah, you know, and one of the things I think that I bring to the table is the experience. My budget isn't trillions of dollars, but we had a $60+ million budget. I had 600 employees. My job was to manage that budget and to make sure that the needs of the community were met, even though my community was one of the fastest growing areas in the state of Arizona for many years. Pinal County, Santan Valley, those were some of the fastest growing areas. Gilbert, Chandler, now you get into these, that's part of this district, Apache Junction, Queen Creek. We've watched the growth, but out there they've done a really good job of managing it. I think we did a great job at the sheriff's office of managing our budget and our growth along with the growth of the community. So I hope to take that same fiscal mindset of being very cognizant of the dollars that we're being given by the taxpayers and giving them the best return on their, it's not really an investment, but you know what I'm saying, a return on investment for what they expect from their government.
At 1 minute left, the difference is the sheriff, you are at the top of the food chain. You're going to be one of 435.
We're at the top of the top of the top.
Right. So how do you build a coalition? How do you make sure it's not just your voice?
So, you know, look, I'm one of almost 3,100 sheriffs in this country, yet we've managed to build a tremendous coalition with sheriffs from all across this country, Republicans, Democrats, all types of sheriffs. What we do is we find common ground. In law enforcement, we understand we have a mission, and the job is to get whatever it is that mission is, to get it done. We got to find common ground to be able to do that. Look, I'm a conservative. I've never wavered on my conservative values, but I'm a very easy person to work with, and I've shown it on a national level with sheriffs, and I don't think it's going to be too tough to show it with 435 members at a federal level.
All right, if you want to learn more about the campaign, just look here on the screen. You'll be able to see it. Look for Mark Lamb, and he could use your help and use your vote.
Yep, marklam.us.
Thanks,
man.
Mike. We'll be back. Coming up, from strikes on drug boats to U.S. Navy ships headed into the Caribbean Sea, an expert shares his thoughts on where the tension between Venezuela and the U.S. is headed when Broomhead returns. Welcome back. Let's talk about Venezuela. Big implications here politically. Joining us, Dr. Charles Ripley, School of Politics and Global Studies at ASU. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited because a few people know about Latin America, even if it's in our own backyard.
And you having lived there for so long and being an expert in the area, I want to start with the implications, the legalities of us going after boats in the open sea and taking them out with our military.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. You know something? The Trump administration was really smart and astute for one reason. They labeled these cartels as terrorist organizations through the State Department. What does that mean? Well, if you look back after 9/11, there were a slew of laws, these authorizations for military attacks against terrorist combats. So now, all of a sudden, he can say, hey, I'm doing exactly what President Obama did in Africa, where he was using drones, taking out terrorist cells. And in fact, Obama was actually entering the sovereign states of African nations to kill people. And his argument was this is legal based on these laws that came out after 9/11. So my argument is if Trump was smart, he would be saying, look, if you have a problem with me doing this, then go back to, as he likes to say, Barack Hussein Obama and say, hey, Dems, why didn't you complain when he was doing it in Africa? Go ahead.
But the intelligence and the accuracy in knowing that these, because that's always the question is, are they getting what the target really is?
That is it. There's so many intelligence failures. So think about it. When Bill Clinton was bombing the former Yugoslavia, boom, he bombs the Chinese embassy. Everyone on the ground is like, I could have told you where to bomb. Huge intelligence failure. When Clinton bombed the Sudan, the Al-Shifa pharmaceutical plant, he said, oh, there's chemical weapons. There's nuclear. Nope, there was nothing there. We all know weapons of mass destruction. Obama going into, Libya, that was a disaster for intelligence. Intelligence faltered. So one of the things, even though I admit that there is a legality here and that Trump can draw upon that, the problem is intelligence failure. And además, moreover, there is the problem with the politicization of intelligence. So you fast forward it, Tulsi Gabbard fired 2 intelligence analysts, brilliant analysts from the NIC, that's the National Intelligence Council, because they said Maduro, the president of Venezuela, was not linked to El Tren de Aragua. So she said, you're fired. We also recently retired, essentially fired, the Southern Command Admiral, Holsey, who's been in Latin America for quite a while. So I'm a little nervous about, 1, intelligence failures, 2, the politicization of intelligence, and, as I tell my students at ASU, have a healthy incredulity. Don't even listen to me. I'm wrong 95% of the time. I want more evidence that there are drugs on those boats.
What does it say to you when we send warships into the area? Are we just sending a message by saying we're here and available, or is it sending a different message?
Oh, it definitely wants to get Maduro out. Look, you do not send these warships like the USS Ford down to the Caribbean in order to have a picnic, right? They're not there to have a birthday party for anyone. They are putting pressure on Maduro. In fact, right now, they're doing these military exercises in Trinidad and Tobago.
So with the history of regime change we've seen around the world, and you could point out many examples, there's a lot of implications of it then becoming chaos, and then what's going to fill that vacuum? And when it was in Iraq, we ended up getting ISIS because of that vacuum that was created.
I think we created ISIS in a way when they debaptized the Iraqi army. Where are these, Sunnis going to go? They have weapons. They know how to use them. They went to ISIS to protect themselves from Shia revenge. In this case, the big problem here is Maduro is not the real power. It's a man named Vladimir Padrino. He's head of the military. So even if Maduro as a figurehead, the Venezuelans actually make fun of him. They call him burro. Burro is donkey in Spanish. Yeah. So even if he goes, there is no guarantee that the military apparatus is going to go with the opposition. And the opposition isn't as popular in Venezuela as like we like to lead on, right? Like the Contra War in Nicaragua, or Ahmad Chalabi talked about when we invaded Iraq. So we got to watch out for, in case the government does fall, will it descend into civil war? And is the United States ready to send troops on the ground or the United Nations or some kind of apparatus to create peace?
That's it. The UN piece of this. Is there a UN piece in this puzzle?
You know something? The United Nations gets a lot of flack. I have done research in Colombia, and after the Colombia Civil War, the peace process, Proceso de Paz, they actually were the only group to be able to go in there, collect all the weapons of the FARC, which is, the guerrilla group, and able to create a modicum amount of peace. In fact, I did a lecture on it. I went into a place where they were trying to incorporate these ex-combatants back into society. But that's one of the problems. You want to talk about drugs. A lot of the drug smugglers are ex-FARC, ex-LEN, ex-guerrilleros that were fighting and then just go back to that.
Fascinating information, and I really appreciate the
That was
information
awesome.
and expertise.
I loved it.
We'll be back. Coming up, what's ahead for the winter season in Arizona? A meteorologist gives his predictions next. Here's a look at some upcoming events that should be on your radar. November 4th is Election Day. This year's proposition on the ballots will vary by city and district. If you haven't voted already, polling locations will open at 6 a.m. on Tuesday. You can visit elections.maricopa.gov to find a polling location near you. Arizona looking forward to the cool winter and fall months ahead. We have that Chamber of Commerce weather. To get the prediction, we go to our expert, Dr. Johnny Malloy. Let's talk about what we can expect this fall. One of the things I've noticed, and it seemed like before in the month of October, we would get a transitional period of a few days, stormy weather, saturating rains that would transition. After that was the cool weather. Is there a term for that? Is that actually what happens?
That actually is a deal, yeah. So Arizona almost has a mini severe season. So when you go into July and August, it's more these air mass type thunderstorms that pop up, right? When you add those troughing dynamics, those upper level dynamics that you can really get storms going and organized, that's when you get severe weather into Arizona. So that lingering monsoon moisture with the winter type troughs moving in, the troughing intrusions can benefit us.
We know that the monsoon was a little less rainy than we would like. We know that the summer temperatures were higher than we would like, necessarily were expected. But what does that say about the winter? Should we expect higher temperatures in the winter, or are they just two different dynamics?
It is a little bit two different dynamics going on. But what we can look at is the El Nino La Nina phenomenon.
Okay.
So this is interesting. So the Climate Prediction Center with NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is kind of looking at a La Nina favored conditions developing over the winter time. So what that means for Arizona is statistically we have a drier winter. The reason for that is when you look at the ocean waters and they're cooler, we get a further northward retreat of that jet stream. So those Pacific storms we've been talking about, those trough intrusions become less frequent statistically.
So we joke around, a lot of us in our business joke about your business because you're right, you're predicting things, but you can't control the elements all the time. A couple of years ago, there was a prediction that it was going to be a very dry winter, but we ended up having one that was more wet than expected. What are the things that play into some of those predictions either being very, very right or sometimes being off?
Yeah, no, that's a great thing. So the 2022 to 2023 winter actually was a banner winter around here. Very wet, a lot of snowpack, a lot of runoff. But it was a La Nina event, right? So this just goes to show you that the El Nino La Nina signal that we talk about is good as a lead indicator of potential weather. But again, weather is weather day to day. So we still need to monitor the weekly patterns. And if we have it set up just right, those storms do add up.
So we talk about the valley and our weather in the wintertime, but what about the up north, and Flagstaff, whether it's going to the ski resorts, snowboarding, what are the expectations for the winter? What should we be looking for?
Yeah, so again, going back to the statistical record, La Nina events do tend to diminish the snowpack, chances of snowpack. So I think Flagstaff, the difference between El Nino and La Nina is like 100 inches of snowfall versus 50 inches of snowfall. But again, we just talked about how that's not guaranteed, right? But we are looking for probably a reduced snowpack chances here coming in. And that's not good for the water resource standpoint.
Well, I was just going to ask that because the thing is we are so concerned about water, but how much does meteorology play a role in the predictions and then what we need to do for water conservation and usage? Do they rely on you for numbers of what to expect so that they're gauging what to do?
They can, yes. So seasonal outlooks are very important for that. But the good news is that our reservoir systems, when we look east of Phoenix, all the dams, Roosevelt, there's a lot of water already built up in case of drier periods. So it's important from a water management standpoint that we have access to that water during drought periods, which can actually still arrive in this wintertime.
So what are your predictions for this year compared to the last few years or previous years? Are we expecting more or less? What is your expectation?
My expectation is, I think an average winter is reasonable.
Okay.
I think it's reasonable because when we look at
what does that look like? Average?
Yeah, average. So, you're expecting, a nice snowfall throughout the winter season, the springtime. So it's not like we're running out of opportunities for the rain and snow to happen. We should have enough throughout the season to help.
So it's that Chamber of Commerce weather that we live here for. The nation looks at us like, what are you doing living in Phoenix in the summertime? But the expectation of the winter is this is exactly why we live here.
Yeah, yes, a lot of people come here for the winter and, the snowbirds, if you will, right? It's a tourist town in the wintertime, should have that expectation.
Doctor, thank you so much for your opinion. It's always great to talk with you. We'll be back. Thank you to all the guests who joined us today. If you missed any of the interviews or would like to rewatch any of them, head over to cw7az.com/Broomhead. This is going to be the last Broomhead show, at least for this year. We don't know what the future holds. But I just wanted to say a thank you to you for watching this show for as long, and CW7 for hosting it and having me here for such a long time. But I especially want to say thank you to a couple of people. Aaron and Alyssa behind the scenes, the producers of this show that do all of the hard work behind the scenes, have been nothing but the best people I've ever worked for or with in this business. It has been a privilege to be here on the Valley and around the state. So thank you for joining us this week on Broomhead.